Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. So it's in some ways a shame that John Timothy couldn't finish his session, mostly because you kind of get into a subject and you're coming at it from a particular point of view and kind of get all of your engines running in that way. It's kind of hard to take a sharp left or right turn. And inevitably in philosophy, though the content is frequently the same, the point of view is personal. There's always something incredibly personal about the way philosophy is done. That's why we remember philosophers and not just philosophies. We try to abstract the philosophy from the philosopher, and it's pretty much impossible to actually do that. If you want to talk about a philosophy, you have to use the words of the person who originally had the thoughts. You can't just turn it into a mathematical equation. Now, math, on the other hand, you can do that. And I think I probably said that before, but math is a much less personal kind of endeavor. Once you've figured it out, everybody else knows how to figure it out. They don't need you anymore. They don't need your words. They don't need your particular approach, because you can abstract math, thought, completely from the person who had it. Whereas in philosophy, you have to try to understand someone's thinking from within, which is a very different way of going about things. In order to understand, and that's the whole point of realistic philosophy, your own experience. I'm sure you guys talked about that with John Timothy. So what are we going to do today? Very simple procedure, content-wise, but it will be fairly demanding because it's not an easy subject. As hopefully you've begun to perceive, metaphysics, as simple as it is, in terms of what we're trying to do, it's a very difficult passage for our minds to make. Our intellect has to kind of slip through this difficult channel, like the Panama Canal, right? Digging out all the gunk, the plaque that has been in our minds for so long. And can I erase this, or was this for...
Yeah, we don't need one.
Okay. I don't know what that was. Was that him?
Yeah.
Wow, he's got nice handwriting.
He does, actually.
Jeez, I'm embarrassed. It's okay, my mom told me I was dysgraphic, so that's why.
You were what?
Dysgraphic. She made up a term to talk about why
That's
my
not made
handwriting
up.
was bad. That's what moms do. They help you come up with excuses for your shortcomings. Anyway, if they're nice, if they're mean, they just throw you out. Anyway.
You're big boned instead of that.
So what we're going to do today is look at the key parts of metaphysics just short of natural theology. If this is completely foreign way of speaking to you about it, then stop me or ask questions, please. Don't just look at me like I'm speaking Chinese. Okay. Because, in fact, the more questions you have, if you have them, the more pertinent the presentation will be. Because I can talk about this stuff all day long, but if it's not meeting you where the gap is, then it's wasted my time and of yours. Not a complete waste, but okay. We will be talking about substance, the induction of the substance, act, the induction of act, and then in the afternoon, a human person. Father Philippe would always say that the metaphysical approach to understanding the human person is actually the ultimate part, the last part of metaphysics. Now, for us, obviously, there's this discovery of God's existence that is very important. Now, after the induction of act, you can then proceed to discovering this what we call the anteriority of act over potency. And that discovery with respect to being, qua being as such, leads to the discovery of the existence of a first being. So that's where this discovery of what the religious traditions call God happens.
Anterior meaning before.
Is that act is before potency. But the problem with the word before is it can mean a lot of different ways of being before.
Mm-hmm.
It could mean in time, in perfection. And Aristotle actually, in book Theta of the Metaphysics, goes through all of the different ways that act is before. And the word anterior is just to insist that we're not talking about time.
Okay, so it's kind of summarizing all the other ways that it's...
Right, so the classic example, what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it depends on whether you're talking about in time or in perfection.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of perfection, the chicken comes first because the chick can become nothing other than a chicken. So it has to be growing, developing in function of something that already exists in the egg, in potency, not in act.
Thanks.
So, Anyway, so this discovery of God's existence comes from this understanding of anteriority of act over potency when we're looking at that at the level of being. And then after that, you can have a full understanding of what the human person is in all of its dimensions. So this afternoon, we'll focus on this. This morning, I'd like to get into the substance as quickly as possible, and then in the second class, act. Now, these, when we went through formation, these were subjects that had an entire year devoted to them. So you would spend a year on substance, you would spend a year on act, a year on the human person, and then you would get another one second time. So we had 4 years. So some people lucked out, got the better stuff. I'm just kidding. It's all good. All the stuff is good.
So
Now,
you could do it in an hour.
So yeah, I'm going to do my best to bring to your attention what it means to try to discover a substance in metaphysics and act, and then the reflection on the human person. And we're going to use this text from Aristotle that comes from book Zeta. That's just a number, but I don't know which number it is. So Zeta, counting the Greek letters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, something like that. Book Zeta, and then in this division, I think it's like chapter 9. It's the last chapter in book Zeta. And then for act, that's book Theta, chapter, it's somewhere in the middle of that book. So that's where the 2 texts that I sent you are coming from. Why those 2 texts in particular? Because those are the places. There's actually 2 in book Zeta. There's one at the very beginning, and then there's one at the very, very end. These are the 2 places where Aristotle does the induction, or demonstrates to us the induction of the substance, and then demonstrates the induction of act. And there too. Demonstrates the induction of substance and demonstrates the... So that's what's happening in these 2 readings that you have. That's why I picked them out of the whole book. Now, for those of you who are interested in looking into it, especially for theology, look at book Lambda. Lambda is all of Aristotle's natural theology. So, where he reflects on God being the contemplation of his own contemplation. God's life being pure joy. Those kinds of things are found in book Lambda. So if you can stay awake through the more difficult parts, there's sometimes these phrases that pop out that are like, oh, that's fantastic. I wish I could have thought that. Anyway. Any questions before I get moving? And you're going to have to feel very comfortable stopping me with questions, because otherwise I risk very quickly talking over your heads unintentionally.
There's
Over
no need,
your heads.
Here's my question. There's
Yeah.
no need for me right now to know what you mean by act on the board right now,
No.
because it's coming later. Okay, that's all. Thanks.
But if you do know something about substance, that's a good starting place. What is this word substance referring to? And then we'll jump right into the text.
Is that the essence of something? That's what comes to my mind. I don't know. Like what something's made of?
Well, so what something's made of
Is the
would be
difference
its
from
matter,
essence and-
right?
Yeah.
So, but that's a very common way of thinking about the word substance, a substantial meal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like those pork chops. You know that it's landing and not going
Those
anywhere
were
for a
good.
while. Sticking. Peanut butter. I mean, you try to come up with the most substantial meal you can come up with, and there's something dense about the matter, right? If we're talking about it in terms of matter. So what does this word substance mean? And you went over with John Timothy yesterday the categories. And if you recall, the first two categories are first substance and second substance. So first substance is anybody remember?
It's all I wrote down was brie, because he was like it's what it is, and he was looking at you. He's like it's brie. So no, I couldn't put it in any other words.
All right, first substance.
I'm sure he explained it better. That's
sure
all I
he
wrote
did.
down. Oops.
Okay,
No,
it's not
fake
quite
or
it.
fail.
Now remember the 10 categories. What are the 10 categories?
First substance,
Modes
second
of
substance.
being.
So modes of
Person.
being. A very simple way of also talking about the categories
But
is say those are the 10 different possible ways that I could describe
Okay,
reality.
Right.
Okay. So it is pre-philosophical language.
Is it something like it's the first thing that you notice?
Right.
First
Well,
is
not the first thing you
person.
notice, but it is and we're going to use this big, long, complicated word, intelligibility.
And the second was the wetness.
That's-
I actually wrote that one down.
Well,
Don't
I
get
don't.
yourself.
You sure about that?
I'm sure that's what I
he
wrote.
told us. He told us the
He
first
said the
is
second one was
person.
intelligibility. I wrote
He
intelligibility
said
for
the
the
second one was intelligibility?
I wrote, yeah, he said the first
Yes.
one was the individual, the second, the wetness.
For intelligibility. The third is quality, fourth is quantity.
I'm pretty sure it's the other way around.
Okay.
But what is important is that we come up in our experience against two things that are substantial and first. Two things we can describe, but that are like the biggest sort of piece that we could take away from reality. So, this substance in both of these, we're talking about the whole of whatever that reality is that we're looking at or we're talking about. And in the whole of that reality, there's two things that you cannot push beyond. on the one hand, first and second, we won't worry too much about that because I was about to say switch the order with John Timothy. There is something important about the order, but we'll not worry about that too much. Also, on the one side, you've got the intelligibility, and on the other side, you have the subject. And so the subject is understood in the sense of that which receives attributes. And the intelligibility is what the thing is. So these are these kind of, if you're going to try to describe something, you get, on the one hand, this universal. So if I'm talking about Catherine, for example, and you're like, well, what is Catherine? Well, Catherine's a woman. Oh, it's not a cat, it's not a dog, it's a woman. So once I've said that, I've said something so specific about what Catherine is. I can't say something more specific about her whatness, her isness. Catherine is a woman. But Catherine is a very particular woman. She has all kinds of specific qualities. Her hair looks a certain way. So in that, all of those attributes adhere to her material subject, her individual existence, right? All the different ways that I could describe Catherine, beyond that she is a woman, is these things that come from her, the fact that she is a material body.
So for take the tree in the corner, is it that it's when the first subject, is it that it's that tree, what's its name?
Lily.
Is it lily as the first substance, or is it tree as the first substance? Do you know what I'm saying?
Right, so one of them,
I get
once
the
again,
subject is more specific or more particular. But
no, the subject is what gives its material concreteness. The concreteness of the thing is its subject.
Okay, so the first substance then, Father, is it, at least as you have it there on the board, even if they might be switched, is it I'm looking at that tree, would I say in concept that's Lily the tree, but it's that's the intelligibility?
Right, the most,
or is it just palm tree?
the most universally specific thing you can say about that reality is that it's a tree. Mm-hmm. Now, this particular tree has a whole assortment of qualities. It's a particular kind of tree. Its leaves are, some of them are a little bit wilty. This leaf over here is this way, whatever. All of that concreteness is talking about the subject. It's talking about what he said yesterday is the first subject, what I think is actually the second subject. That's substance. Whereas the intelligibility is the universe. So you've got kids, right? Trying to go as their babies between man and my dad, right? Because all men are not my dad. And as obvious as that is to us today, it is something that is a progressive thing with experience in getting beyond this universal to something that's more individualized. Say, well, all of these attributes are actually specific about my dad. Now, in a metaphysical way, we're going to push that even further to see how is it that both of these things are first about reality in my description. That means that they both have to be flowing from a cause. So what is causing you, Catherine, to exist, not only as woman, but as this particular woman, is substance. So that is, very simply put, the induction of the substance. And what we'll do is we'll look at Aristotle's text a little bit. He gives a few other examples, comes at it from a few other ways to see how that's happening. But the most important thing to realize is that at one level of analysis, I can't say anything more specific about you than your nature, what you are. And yet, if all I went around and said is, this is a woman, this is a woman, that's a woman, there's like a whole spectrum of reality that I'm missing out on. And yet, all of the features that make you particular don't actually, aren't really that interesting.
Or fundamental to what I am.
But there's something else that's causing both you to be a woman and you to have all of these qualities that's more radically first and more specifically speaks about the whole. And that's what we're trying to get to in the induction of the substance. Is that there's something else that's at the source of both of these firsts. First in the line of the intelligibility, and in the line of the material subject, the concrete individual. I mean, if you were to say, what is Catherine? Catherine is hair. Catherine is eyes. Catherine is...
mostly hair.
Catherine is, I don't know, all these different qualities. Catherine is loving. You still haven't said what Catherine is. You can't capture Catherine's substance in a word.
The attributes.
In
Great.
either the attributes or in the intelligibility. Because if you say, what is Catherine? You say, Catherine is a woman.
It doesn't tell you
enough.
enough.
If we knew we weren't talking about animals or trees with names, so, which is odd also that we would give a tree a name or an animal a name, because there's almost something not unique enough about animals or trees to have them be really specifically different. Now, occasionally when a tree has lived a very long time, occasionally when, there's other, or it's been bronzed and it becomes a work of art, then it gets a name. Or when it's lived in Richard and Joan and Richard's house for like 30 years. I mean,
It gets a name.
Maybe that's enough for a name. I don't know.
37.
All right.
She earned the name.
So any questions about that stuff? Because that's what we're going to be looking at with Aristotle right now, is how he articulates the induction of the substance. Okay, so these are the elements that are at play. Here and here. The two principal thought pieces, logical pieces for the induction of the substance. So let us jump in.
Wait, quick question.
Of course.
So I think another way of saying that, sometimes the substance is defined as, first substance is defined as that which is neither said of the subject nor exists in the subject.
What was the first thing? Neither said as...
Said of the subject nor
said
exists
of
in the
the-
subject? Isn't that how he says it? I see how that, okay, maybe I'm just...
I mean, if there's something about that helps you see it a little bit more clearly, then I would, to me, I'm having trouble grasping it more clearly that way.
Like you wouldn't walk around saying Savannah is woman. Is that... It's something that's understood, but you wouldn't use it as a description?
Well, I think the first, it's neither said of the subject, because then it would be like the second substance, right? Like the second substance are things that are said of the subject.
Right. Or let's put it, maybe I'm going to put a little spin on it, see if that changes things. So, for example, Catherine is not woman. She's not the whole of what womanhood is.
Right.
There is even as, it's true, it's hard for us to think that the universal is somehow a great accomplishment for our mind. That we've been able to distinguish things and give them very clear names. It seems like a kind of elementary thing for us to do. But we have to remember that that is the highest thing that we can say in terms of intelligibility about a reality. And that reality, even though that's a very high level of intelligibility, not only is it not the totality of it, Catherine is not all of what woman is, but she represents completely and fully, and she is completely and fully what woman is. And she's more than that. She's more than just a woman. And it's not because of her features, and it's not because of the qualities that she has. It's because of something more radical. At the level of being, she is completely unique. And it's not, once again, not because of the different specificities. Her womanness and her concrete existence are both coming from a unique source. And that's the substance, as understood here. Because what we do is we move from first substance and second substance to the ousia. I don't know if he used that word. Did he use that word? Okay.
Sounds
Sort of offensive. So ousia, all that is the Greek word for substance. And what it means is that there's a principle, a substance principle, that is source of the two things we can say about something at the level of substance. That is substantial in a substantial way. Because both of these are things that we can still describe. The substance itself, we can't describe it. It's beyond description. But it does have a very important role, that of being the cause and principle of being. And here we would add, since in a minute we will see another cause and principle of being, cause and principle of being in the line of the form. Now, what does this phrase, in the line of the form, mean? It means that as I am attempting to grasp what this reality is, and I see that both woman is not sufficient to say what this reality is, nor is Catherine enough on its own to say what this reality is. I have to have both of them together. And so even if the radical subject here is, and the best way I can make a specific attribution of that is Catherine, because Catherine sums up all of her attributes. This is Catherine. If I'm trying to know what Catherine is, if I'm trying to know what I am, because that's really where we have to start as we're trying to discover the substance, then it's not just this body that carries all of the different specific attributes that I have, nor is it simply the universal abstraction I can make of myself. I'm a man, and my name is Father Francis Therese. But in that same line of thought, in the line of thinking about the whatness of something, I can come up against that ultimate cause and principle of being, which is the substance principle, or the ousia. The ousia being the source of both of those. Now, you can get to a point where you've kind of got a representation of what that looks like in your imagination, but the trick is, in your experience, to come back and to see how, that's funny. There's something more than either one of those two kind of firsts. So Aristotle's got a great example in his reflection. Boy, let me see if I can find it here. pulled up the wrong translation. There we go. Perfect. All right, so we are in book Zeta, chapter 17. Okay. So let us state what should be said to the genus and differentia. So, or what is that what your translation sounds like?
Said to be the genus and the differentias.
Taking another starting point. Okay. For perhaps from this we shall get a clear view also of that substance which exists apart from sensible substances. So you can see in this that the whole impetus behind Aristotle's reflection in metaphysics is to try to answer the question about separated substances. Okay? Now, what does he mean by separated substances? He means all of the substances that I have the experience of are sensible and therefore material. Now, when I begin to grasp something about being, that being itself is not material, and that even though I can sense something, my knowledge of it or my judgment of existence goes beyond the sensible experience. It's not the same as touching something, knowing that it exists. It's not the same as hearing something, as knowing that it exists. There's those qualities that hit me. There's the sensitive experience that floods me. And then there's that act of my intellect that says, oh, this is real. Okay, so Aristotle is saying, now, I know that being, what my intellect can know about sensible realities is beyond simply the fact that they're made of something. My intellect reaches beyond the sensible level. Is it then possible, or are there substances that exist without material composition, that are not made of something? I've seen from my experience that things that exist, their being itself, which I can know, is not sensible, but it's intelligible. And so the question becomes, since that intelligible part of reality is at the root, the source of all of its sensible qualities and things, the form is going to determine then what it looks like, what it smells like. I mean, what it is more important than those secondary qualities, because the secondary qualities flow from what it is. If you were something else, you would have to have different qualities. And so the material part, you won't just morph into a cat. Or even if your name could be morphed into cat, you wouldn't be able to do that. And so the qualities that you have are coming from what you are. So that formal, existential principle in you is what's key. And it isn't itself something material. So the question becomes, are there then things that exist that aren't things, but that are simply substances, in the sense that they have nothing material that adheres to them?
Well,
they have no body.
Right, because what I was thinking was like, because he was talking about, where is it? I mean, basically, like when you get to, so we were talking about the table, right? And then like what are like all these different questions you get asked of the table. What is it? What's it made of? Where does it come from? And he was like saying that essentially that the table doesn't just come from a carpenter, it comes from an idea in the carpenter's head, right? Like
in his mind, yeah.
In his mind, yes, sir. That is the source, and what I was wondering is that, because if it's the source of something, then it has to be a thing itself, right? So is that, what you're getting to is like thoughts themselves. Do they have substance, or is there? I mean, I know
Thoughts
what you're
don't
talking
have-
about is like, I know angels. I mean, they're
Mhm.
going to have substance without having like a material form.
Right.
But
It would seem, so that's the progression is, it would seem that being immaterial is more perfect than being material. And so if we can know, because that's what we understand about being, is that the immaterial aspect of it is what determines even the material aspect of it. Without a form, matter simply decomposes. It simply is moved by the elemental forces of nature. That's what our experience of the material world is. And so there's something invisible, something formal that holds and gives quality to a material body, whatever it may be, a physical body. Now that is clearly more perfect. What is able to inform, what is able to determine something else is more perfect. And so the form is more perfect. So if the form is more perfect, the intelligibility is more perfect, and in a certain way you could even say that the idea is more perfect than what's made from the idea. And that was where Plato went off the deep end, because he had that understanding of the form as being that highest perfection, meant that everything else in its concreteness around us were just sort of terrible reflections or inadequate reflections of what the perfect ideal would be. Now that's true in art. Hopefully the artists among us can understand that what I wanted to do, what I saw in my mind, what I was able to then produce was not perfectly, or, I mean, the better that you get at it, the closer what you have in your idea is to then what you can produce. But the way that you produce things in art is difficult. Sometimes the matter doesn't want to cooperate. A famous example is you're carving a statue and there's a knot, a hidden knot in the wood that you didn't know was there, and you get to that perfect carving of the shoulder or whatever, and you hit the knot and the thing cracks or like a piece of it falls out. The idea was much better than what the concrete reality was able to give back. So in that relationship, we can see that there is an order of perfection. The idea is more perfect. Now, in philosophy, it's not simply an ideology. That's why we criticize ideology a lot, because ideology comes up with a perfect thought and then expects reality to conform to it. And if reality doesn't conform to it, we have to change reality. So Marxism, communism, the different isms, forcing reality to conform to an ideal vision that I have. So we see that in philosophy, that doesn't work. But at the same time, we can ask ourselves, knowing that something that is form is more perfect than matter, because matter receives from the form its determination, its intelligibility, what it is. We can say, well, are there then forms, are there then substances that exist apart from matter? And if there are, how could I come to know their existence? Not just imagine it, not just infer it. And of course, the big question there is God. I mean, that's where, if there is a being that is not material, he is before mine, because my existence is incredibly conditioned by the fact that I'm in a body, and that I began to exist at some point and I didn't before that. Proof is, my body hasn't always been here. When I began to exist, that was because there's this material component. All right. So that's where, perhaps from this point of view, we shall get a clear view also of that substance which exists apart from sensible substances. There must be a substance that's more perfect than mine, because mine has not always existed, and yet form is more perfect than matter. So there has to be a form that's always existed that was not conditioned by the material world. Since then, substance is a principle and a cause, and here we are definitely using the word ousia, so that's where you see this word ousia. Since then, substance, ousia, is a principle and a cause. Let us attack it from this standpoint. The why is always sought in this form. Why does an attribute attach to a subject? Okay? Why, great question, why is Catherine's curly hair attached to her existence? That's the direction our mind is trying to go with this question. Why does an attribute attach to a subject? Why does painting attach to Bree? Why does writing attach to Savannah? Why does basketball attach to Francis Therese? Why does vacuuming the chapel attach to anybody that would want to do that if it was their week? Why does Ohio attach to Regina? Why does... See, all these different attributes, why are they attached? Well, it's because I'm a body. It's not just because you're a body. Ohio-ness doesn't attach to you because you're a body. It's definitely close to that. If your body was somewhere else, Ohio wouldn't attach to you. Like it doesn't particularly attach to me. Maybe some memories of Ohio attach to me. Why does an attribute attach to a subject? For to inquire why the musical man is a musical man is either to inquire, as we have said, why the man is musical, or it is something else. Now, why a thing is itself is doubtless meaningless. For to give meaning to the question why, the fact or the existence of the thing must already be evident. That the moon is eclipsed. But the fact that a thing is itself is the single reason and the single answer to all such questions as why the man is man, or the musical, unless one were to answer because each thing is inseparable from itself. And its being one just meant this. Okay, so the problem or the issue that we're looking at here is more than just why is pick on someone else. Why is John Timothy a brother? The question we're looking at is why is John Timothy? Why is John Timothy? Not just why is John Timothy a man, or why is he this man, but why is John Timothy? What is the cause of John Timothy?
You're saying, and that's saying that's a meaningless question?
That's not a meaningless question.
So it says now why a thing is itself is doubtless a meaningless inquiry. For to give meaning to the question why. Yeah, I'm just like not checking.
Sure. So it's a meaningless question unless you're able to push it to that causal level.
Oh. Okay.
This, however, is common to all things is short.
Oh, right. Okay. Thanks.
Because each thing is inseparable from itself. Okay, so if you just said, well, the reason that John Timothy is a brother is because he can't be anything else. He's inseparable from himself. That's what he is. It's a pretty bad answer. It's easier if you use, why is John Timothy a man? Well, because that's what he is. You can't be something other than what you are. You'd say, I want to be men. Okay. Yeah, our modern brains always go to that like little stuff. Well, if you change that, then okay. Why is John Timothy a human being? Well, because that's what he is. Oh, maybe he can become a cat. No, he can't become a cat. Okay. This, however, is common to all things and is a short and easy way with the question. But we can inquire why man is an animal of such and such a nature. Here, then, we are evidently not inquiring why he who is a man is a man. We are inquiring, then, why something is predicable of something. Why something can be said about something. That it is predicable must be clear. That it is predicable must be clear. For if not, the inquiry is an inquiry into nothing. So that's obvious. Okay. Why is it possible to say something about Catherine? That's the question that's trying to grasp the cause of Catherine's existence. Why is it possible to say something about Catherine? We are inquiring then why something is predicable of something. That it is predicable must be clear, for if not, the inquiry is an inquiry into nothing. For example, why does it thunder? This is the same as why is sound produced in the clouds. Thus, the inquiry is about the predication of one thing of another. And why are certain things, stones and bricks, a house? Plainly, we are seeking the cause. Great. Why are... that's a good way of putting it. It's the artistic analogy. Why are stones and brick a house? What caused stones and bricks to be a house? It's the idea of the builder. Otherwise, stones and bricks can't be a house. Never. There's no way for stones and bricks to randomly land and be a house. Or for metal to fall from the sky and turn into a plane. That doesn't happen. Unless you read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy with the infinite probability drive. Stupid stuff. Sorry. It's not philosophy. Why are certain things, stones and bricks, a house? Plainly, we're seeking the cause. And this is the essence. Let me see what that word is in Greek real quick. Become light. Oh yeah, thunder. Okay. So the essence there is intelligibility. That's the word for intelligibility. The toti and enai in Greek. And this is the intelligibility, which in some cases is the end, perhaps in the case of a house or a bed, and in some cases is the first mover, for this is also a cause. But while the efficient cause is sought in the case of genesis and destruction, the final cause is sought in the case of being also. So there he deviates a little bit from this perspective on the substance and talks a little bit about the end. So in looking for the end, that's where we'll see in the next class about act. Whereas in this one, we're looking at the intelligibility. Plainly, we're seeking the cause, an intelligible cause, and this is the essence, to speak abstractly, which in some cases is the end. Now it says to speak abstractly, but I don't think that's in the text.
Yeah, it puts it in parentheses.
Okay. And this is the intelligibility, and then in Greek it says, as is the like its logical reason. In some cases, the first mover is also the cause. But while the efficient cause is sought in the case of genesis and destruction, and coming to be, and in corruption, the final cause is sought in the case of being also. So we're going to just hop that last sentence because it's not going to help. The object of the inquiry is most overlooked when one term is not expressly predicated of another, when we inquire why man is. Because we do not distinguish and do not say definitely, why do these parts form this whole? We must distinguish the elements conceptually, or we must distinguish the elements before we begin to inquire. If not, it's not clear whether the inquiry is significant or unmeaning. Since we must know the existence of the thing, and it must be given, clearly the question is why the matter is some individual thing. Why are these materials a house? Because that which was the essence of a house is present. The substance, the underlying, the foundation, arche, the underlying cause. Because that which was the essence of a house is present. And why is this individual thing, or this body, in this state, a man? Therefore, what we seek is the cause, the form, by reason of which the matter is some definite thing. Right? And there's, once again, that's where we see that how form is anterior to matter. Matter exists because of the form that determines it. You don't just have pure matter. Matter always is depending to even be on some kind of form, even if it's a confused form, even if it's a reality that is losing a more perfect form. There's still something that is exercising an efficient cause on matter, either moving it or forming it, and that cause is some kind of a form. Even if we look at the natural level, what's happening beneath the natural forms of, like, our bodies, for example, when something dies and it starts corrupting, what's happening is that more fundamental movement, that more fundamental determination of matter takes over, the elemental determinations of matter. So a body, a more perfect physical reality, returns to its elements. It doesn't just go away, but the natural movement, and the representations for that in ancient philosophy are fire, wind, earth, and water. Those natural movements take back over. There's a form to that movement. There's a form to decomposition. Even if it seems sort of chaotic or whatever, there's a return to a more fundamental form. And that's the form upon which our human form is based, or our human form is developed, a more complex form. So what we're looking for is the cause, the form, by reason of which the matter is some definite thing. This matter is some definite thing because there's a cause, because there is a form, because there's something that's led it there. And this is the substance of the thing. So the cause, the substance, the principle of what a thing is its substance. If it didn't have a substance, we can't really imagine that. But a more perfect substance, you can. You can say, without the more perfect substance of my soul, my body returns to the elements, a less perfect substance, the natural the material world, the physical world. So there's a more perfect substance that allows that greater complexity. Evidently then, in the case of simple terms, no inquiry nor teaching is possible. Our attitude towards them is other than that of inquiry. Whatever. As regards that which is compounded out of something, so that the whole is one, not like a heap, however, but like a syllable, an ordered, organized whole, not just a disorganized assembly. And this is a good example for the induction of the substance. That's really why we're reading it. It's probably the more important one to try to retain, if you want to come back to it, is the example of the syllable. The syllable is not its elements. Ba, that's very important. You have to say, ba, is not the same as B and A. B and A is not the same thing as ba. If you've ever taught kids to speak, you know that you can have all of the letters, but that doesn't make syllables. You have to show them that you put consonants and vowels together, and that makes something new. But the consonants and the vowels are there. They're very much absolutely present. But there's something new, something substantially new in the formation of a syllable. The syllable is not its elements. You can't say, now in math, right, you could say, well, it's a little harder, because it's not really just in jokey math, okay? Not following the rules of like algebra. In math, A plus B is their combination, simply, right, which is total. So we'll just say AB or BA. You know, in math, that means the letters times each other. Mm-hmm. But it's the combination of the two. Mm-hmm. Well, ba, the syllable, is not simply B and A. It is both of those, but together in a new way. So it's still like an example coming from art, like we have with the house. Bricks and mortar. A house is not just bricks and mortar. It's bricks and mortar and something else much more important than the bricks and mortar. The idea, the work that went into it, the formation of it. And I think it's good to try to come up with an example that speaks to you a little bit more. If you were doing, some kind of a project, if you were working on something, there's the things that you were using, and then there's the result of what you put into it, which uses what was there, but produces something completely new and novel. And if you're like, well, we're running out of ba, could someone just send me a whole bunch of boxes of B and A, please? It's still not ba. You have to do something with B and A to get ba. And in philosophy and metaphysics, what we're seeing is that something has already been done in us that causes our elements, and elements not just in the sense of physical elements, but in the sense of what makes us what we are, all of the different qualities that we have. There's something that makes us that, uniquely and specifically. That's the substance. Our substance causes us to exist as that. So our ba is not just the whole litany and list of the B's and A's and C's and everything that we have. Ba is not the same as B and A, nor is flesh, fire, and earth, right? Just a combination of the elements. It's the combination of the elements and something else. Now, what is that something else, and how do we understand that something else? For when they are dissolved, the wholes, i.e. the flesh and the syllable, no longer exist. But the elements of the syllable exist, and so do fire and earth. The syllable then is something, not only its elements, the vowel and the consonant, but also something else. And the flesh is not only fire and earth, or the hot and the cold, but also something else. Since then, that something must be either an element or composed of elements. If it is an element of the same argument, the same argument will again apply. Okay, so what he's doing now is he's going through the logical process of what this other thing is. Okay, B and A. Ba. Ba is more than B and A. Has something more than just B and A. Now, is that something more itself just an element? Or is it other than an element? That's what this question is. If it's an element, the same argument will again apply. So we just try to break Ba, taking out the two elements, whatever's left over from the two elements, their composition, and try to break it down further. Flesh will consist of this, and fire and earth, and something still further. So this process will go on to infinity. But if it's a compound, clearly it will be a compound not of one, but of many, or else it will itself be the one. So that again, in this case, we will use the same argument as in the case of flesh or of the syllable. But it would not seem that this other is something, and not an element. Or it would seem that this other is something, and not an element. That the composition of the elements is something other than the elements themselves. And that this is the cause which makes this thing flesh and that a syllable. And similarly in all other cases. And this is the substance of each thing, for this is the primary cause of its being. And since while some things are not substances, as many as are substances are formed by nature, their substance would seem to be this nature. So, real quick, what is the substance of a tree?
It's nature.
Right. Tree nature. Treeness. What is the substance? And understood not simply as a universal, but as a cause that's actually present in that particular tree, causing it to be what it is. It's nature. So, the cat, same thing. Now, human being, we'll see it's a little bit trickier. Simply another case, and this is the substance of each thing, for this is the primary cause of its being. And since while some things are not substances, as many as are substances are formed by nature, their substance would seem to be this nature, which is not an element, but a principle. An element is that into which a thing is divided, and which is present in it as matter. A and B are the elements of the syllable. So, when we're doing this induction of the substance, we don't have to make it more complicated than what it is, but it's understanding that there is a real principle that is the source, the last source, the final source, the base source for all of the qualities and attributes of the thing that exists that's in front of me. And it's not simply an agglomeration of elements that were sort of put together well, and then its principle walked away. The principle is there with it. Now the principle, that's the interesting thing. If you look, and we're going to stop. We'll stop. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death.